Alan Hansen is regarded as one of the great British defenders of the modern era. During his time at Anfield, he won every major honour in the game, eventually captaining Liverpool's 1986 double-winning side. His style and authority at the heart of the Liverpool defence helped make the Reds one of the most feared sides in club football. On the first side of this tape, Alan recalls his early career in Scotland, his debut at Anfield, and reveals the secret to Liverpool's unparalleled success.
Well, basically I've played football as long as I can remember. My father played semi-professional in Scotland, and my brother, who was 5 years older than me, he played all the time. And as a kid I used to follow him about and stand in wet, muddy pitches and sometimes not getting a game, and hopefully getting on for the last 5 or 10 minutes if I was picked. And it was just a natural progression to keep on playing. I went to a school and they played football, and I played for the school team and then the county team. And then when I went to secondary school, I was playing Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. But really, I never ever wanted to be a footballer. I wanted to be a golfer. But the great thing about me, I was always a realist. And I knew that about 16, 17, I was never going to be great as a professional golfer. So I ended up playing football. Everybody thought that I should be playing football, and especially my father, who was absolutely football crazy. And if ever I needed football boots, the money would be there. But if ever I needed golf clubs, the money wouldn't be there. And I had to fend for myself. To buy golf clubs or any golf equipment, I had a paper round for the age of sort of 9 or 10. Something my son hasn't got these days, but I had to pay my own way at golf, whereas at football, everything would be there for me. I was good at several sports at school. I played volleyball to high standard and squash to high standard, and obviously golf and football. I went to one of the new comprehensive schools. It was a £4 million school in 1969. I'd never seen the inside of a squash court before, and suddenly I was playing 4 or 5 hours a day and got to a relatively high standard at that. And obviously that was good for the fitness of football, because it's a very quick game, and I wasn't the quickest of players at football, and playing squash certainly helped me along. Volleyball came naturally because I was 6'2" at 15, and obviously that helps. And as far as the golf and football was concerned, I was playing golf 4 or 5 times a week, and I was playing football maybe a couple of nights a week and twice on a Saturday. I was quite good academically. I could have gone to Aberdeen University to study history, but I was proficient at 3 or 4 sports, and because of that, I've been good at volleyball and good at squash and good at golf and football. Somebody says, why don't you go to PE college? So I tried to go to Jordan Hill Academy, which was a PE college in Scotland, and one thing led to another, and I never made it. I was very good sports-wise, and I wasn't bad academically, but at that age, 17, 18, I was a bit of a rebel. I had a bad attitude, as the PE teacher put it, and the headmaster put it, and I didn't get into PE college. So at age 18, I was left with nothing to do. I played for the local team called Socky Juniors, a mining village in Scotland, and we played against Partick Thistle, the team that my brother played for. And I didn't play badly in the game, and Dave McPallen, the manager, came to me the next day and said, would you sign for Partick Thistle and play professional football? Well, I didn't have a job, I didn't have any money, and it seemed a logical thing to do. And before I knew it, I was playing for Partick Thistle. I went and did the first pre-season at Partick, and it was different, because anybody that's ever done pre-season at a football club will tell you that it's so hard, and you come home at night and you don't know how you're going to face the next day. But there was a great camaraderie there, a great spirit, and the Glasgow humour is second to none, and I fitted in quite well. And before I know it, I was having a life in football. My dad was absolutely delighted, obviously, that I'd signed for Partick Thistle. And he had been watching my brother John for the 4 years previously, and they'd actually won the Scottish League Cup against Celtic in 1971. And I mean, I was there that day at Hampden when they beat Celtic 4-1, and nobody could believe it. And everybody was ecstatic, and I think that might have been one of the reasons that I did sign for Partick Thistle, watching that game at Hampden that day and thinking about the glory and the great times that you could have if you became successful as a footballer and actually win trophies. So I started playing at Partick, and it wasn't all smooth, because I was 6'2" and I was lightweight, and I think I was about 11.5 stone when I joined Partick, and I was getting pushed off the ball, and I was weak in my left side and bad in the air, and I always had the ability but I never really had the strength at that age. And after about 6 weeks, I played for the first team. I was thrown to the first team and had an absolute nightmare at Dundee. We got beaten 4-0 in the League Cup, and I caused 3 of the 4 goals, and I thought I'd never play again. And then for the next 4 or 5 weeks, I never even got in the reserve side, and you become quickly disillusioned, and you think, well, what am I doing here? Why should I be doing this? But then eventually I just put on the weight, and it was a gradual progression again that I just became better and better. I think the great thing about playing at Partick for the 4 years was we had some good players and we had great times, but the Glasgow humour is second to none. It's cynical, and if you're on the end of it, it's not much fun, but if you're in the middle, it's superb. And at Partick, we used to have maybe 3,000 or 4,000 regulars, and on what they call the terracing side, about 1,800 in there on a Saturday. And they would be ruthless at times, you know, the banter coming out there, and you could hear everything on the pitch. And they obviously didn't like their team getting beaten. And one Saturday we were playing, this is true, we're 5-1 down against Dundee United, and we're going for a 50 feet in the trot. And of course nobody's going near that side because you know you're going to get slaughtered. And we had a crowd pleaser called Bobby Houston, who could play right back and right midfield. And unfortunately for Bobby, he found himself on that side of the pitch, and the crowd were like wanting blood. But you can always think about one little old man in the crowd that will support his team to the death. And of course, as I said, you can hear every voice that comes out of there. And this guy, 5-1 down, he shouted out, "Come on, Bobby's on the ball." And the guy shouted, "Come on, Bobby, give us a bit of magic." And I'm not kidding you, within a mega second, the next voice has come out of the crowd saying, "I disappear." Well, Bobby is next to me in the Dundee United left back, and he stood in the ball and fell over. And the ball is literally 5 yards between myself and the Dundee United left back. We couldn't go for it because we were laughing. "Give us a bit of magic, I disappear." Oh, dearie me. I eventually became a regular in the first team the next season, and I played for the Scotland under-23s, and I was tapped up twice. I was tapped up by Rangers and tapped by Celtic, and it's meant to be illegal, but it happens all the time. And I actually thought I was going to go to Ibrox or Parkhead, and religion didn't come in it. I would have gone to either side. Big clubs, great clubs, lots of money, and it just never happened. For one reason or another, there was players going. Ronnie Glavin went to Celtic from Partick, Joe Craig went to Celtic from Partick, and not me. And I thought the move was never ever going to come. And then all of a sudden, the end of season 1977, Liverpool came in. And at that time, Liverpool were going for a treble. And I was absolutely petrified about going to Liverpool. Because, you know, I was a small town boy from Socky, and I'd never left home in 22 years. And all of a sudden, I'm signing for Liverpool, and I'm going to this big city and going with these great players, Keegan, Tommy Smith, Phil Thompson, Terry McDermott, and it was fear and trepidation when I went on the train to Liverpool, actually to sign. Never any hesitation that I wouldn't sign for them. Majestic club, final of the European Cup, going for the League Championship and the final of the FA Cup. But it was funny, I went down the train with Scott Simon, who was the general manager at Partick at that time, and he had been a big influence on all the Rangers' success, and he was in the sort of twilight of his career. And we got down to Anfield, and Bob Paisley met us at the station, and he drove us up to Anfield, and the negotiations took 5 minutes. I mean, the fee was all agreed, and they gave me 3 times what I was earning at Partick, so obviously I was delighted. But then Scott said to Peter Robinson, the secretary at Liverpool, said, how are you going to pay? Thinking he was going to pay in instalments. And Peter Robinson said, "Yeah, it's no problem, I'll give you the cheque now." Well, it was £100,000, which in those days was a lot of money. And Scott sort of started to stutter a bit and said, "Well, give me the cheque now." And Peter said, yeah, I'll just give you it. So he signed the cheque, Scott put it in his pocket, and all the way back to Glasgow at night, Scott was taking it out every 5 minutes and looking at it just to make sure he had it. But and that was it. I was signed for Liverpool, and I went down there, and it was never a problem. Right from day one, I settled in. The lads there were fantastic. The first day I was there, Terry McDermott and Phil Thompson came after training, took me out for a couple of drinks, and I was made to feel at home.
and they were just a great club. And that was the great thing about those days, was anybody coming into that dressing room, even although you had big stars, you had superstars, they were all made to feel at home. And I think that was one of the great secrets about Liverpool, right the way through the 70s and 80s. They never had any stars in the dressing room. Everybody played their part, and everybody would help the newcomers coming in, and everybody was really friendly. And the team spirit at that time was fantastic. Well, Liverpool were on the television all the time, so I knew all about the players, but I never knew how they would take to me. Obviously, being Scottish and having a great history of Scots at Liverpool, I just didn't know what to expect. And when I went into that dressing room from day one, there was never a problem. And of course, talking about Scotsmen, a month later, Kenny Dalglish signed from Celtic, and then 6 months later, Graham Souness signed from Middlesbrough. So we had actually 3 Scots in there in 6 months. And what we tried to do in that dressing room was we tried to portray the Scots as the master race. And it wasn't really that difficult, because the average IQ in there was about -6 at the time. And of course, Souness and Dalglish have never lost an argument in their lives, and I'm not far behind them, so it wasn't really that difficult. And for the next 3 or 4 years, whenever Liverpool were winning trophies, we used to have what they call a jock picture, where the 3 of us would get in a picture and have it taken, and then the Englishmen weren't allowed in, or the Irishmen or the Welshmen weren't allowed in, and that used to infuriate everybody. It really did. The jocks used to stick together. And I always remember 1981 in one of the papers, it was our crowning moment of glory, that they asked the top 5 intellects in the United Kingdom who were the 10 greatest men of all time. And there was 3 Scotsmen in the 10, and not an Englishman in sight. And Graham Souness actually got 20 copies of the particular paper and brought them into Anfield and placed them all about the dressing room, which obviously to the annoyance of Englishmen. I remember my debut at Anfield vividly, because again it was fear and trepidation, it really was. Liverpool at that time were getting sort of 54,000 inside and 10,000 outside. And I remember the Thursday Bob Paisley coming up to me at Melwood, the training ground, and saying, do you fancy it? What can you say to that? I said, of course I fancy it. He said, well, you're going to play Saturday. So for the next 2 days, I'm like a nervous wreck. And I remember coming back from the hotel to Anfield on the day of the game and sitting opposite Ray Clements and not saying a word. And Ray said, "Are you alright? You'll be fine. Once you get out there, the nerves will disappear and people will look after you, and I'll push you into position and there'll be no problem." And that made me feel a bit better. But then we got near the ground, and this is at 10 to 2. There is 10,000 people outside Anfield, and you come through into the car park and you start thinking, if I make it's always negative thoughts in my mind. I'm thinking, if I make a mistake here and cost them the game, then people will say it's a bad signing and you'll never be a player, and all of these sort of things come through your mind. And I go in the dressing room, and Bob Paisley comes up to me and he said, "Just you play the way you're capable of playing and you'll not have a problem." And then all the lads are very supportive. Kenny Dalglish is sitting beside me, and he just turned to me and said, "It's not a problem. Just go out there and show them what you can do." But the first touch in a game like that is always important. And it was about 9 minutes before I actually touched the ball, and I'm thinking, when am I going to get a touch here? Because Liverpool at that time were so far on top, they're playing Derby County, and the opposition used to come back and get 9 men behind the ball. And of course, I think on purpose they were trying to keep the ball away from me, because they knew I was so nervous, and just trying to ease me in. And after about 9 minutes, it came to me, and I thought, well, just play this simple. And I knocked it wide to Joey Jones on the left-hand side, and I felt great after that. And the crowd were unbelievable, because actually I played quite well in the day, and they started chanting my name, spasmodically. And again, it's just one of these feelings that you can never forget, and it'll be with me forever. It was very, very special. And of course, we won the game 1-0, and I was in the team for 5 or 6 weeks after that. And then I found out what it really was like to play for Liverpool, because they were a top team. And the difference between playing in Scotland and England is that obviously the teams are so much better, they're so much bigger, and every game for Liverpool was like a cup final. When playing for Partick, you'd play against opposition, and if you didn't win the game, then there'd be no courts of inquiry and no inquest. Whereas at Liverpool, if you were drawn a game, and if you get beat, then the courts of inquiry would go on for for as long as it took, and then on beyond that until actually you started winning a game. So I found the pressure intense right from the word go playing for Liverpool. But again, that's life at the top. If you're at the top of any profession, then the pressure is going to be intense. But because the expectations of the press, the media, and supporters, the pressure was really more intense. Well, I replaced Emlyn Hughes in the heart of the Liverpool defence and played alongside Phil Thompson, and we forged a great partnership. We were telepathic. The minute the ball went over his head, he knew I'd be there. And the minute the ball went over my head, I knew he was covering on the back of me. With Ray Clemens in goals, who, for me, was the greatest goalie of all time in English football. He, not only for his handling, but his organisational skills at pushing and pulling people into position. He helped me tremendously in sort of the first year at Liverpool. He just by his voice. 2 yards to the left, 2 yards to the right, 2 yards further back, pick up, push out. Him and Phil Thompson, probably in the early days, were the biggest influences on me. Obviously, the Scottish connection were great with me, and because I was sort of the kid in the team, and Graham and Kenny would look after me. And if things were going badly, a little bit of encouragement here, a little bit of encouragement there. The manager at the time, Bob Paisley, was terrific. He, not a great wordsmith, but everything he said that you'd always take. There was a couple of things early on that he said to me that initially I thought were a load of rubbish. But the longer I played the game, the more it came to life. For example, he said the first 2 yards at the top level on your head. If you analyse that, you think, oh, what does that mean? But it's perfectly true. The first 2 yards are in your head. If you the speed of thought playing professional football at the highest level is so vitally important. I think the greatest example of that would be Dalglish, who was 4 yards in front of everybody. He wasn't the quickest in the pitch, but because of the speed of thought, he was there before anybody else. It was great to play with him at his peak, because as a central defender, when you were playing into his feet, you could play it 3 or 4 yards either side of him, and he was always going to get it. Now, for confidence for the player in possession, that was phenomenal. You knew that you could hit a bad one in, and if it was anywhere near him, he was so strong and so sharp that he was going to pick it up. There was just quality right through the team. Terry McDermott was a fabulous player, very underrated. And I think if you go back in the last 20 years and you talk about the great midfield players, he probably wouldn't get mentioned. And it's probably because he played for Liverpool. And there was great stars there. Dalglish and Souness took the headlines, and quite rightly so. But the other players sometimes were left out, whereas at Arsenal and Tottenham, the likes of the Bradys and the Hoddles took the limelight, and Terry Mack was every bit as good a player. Some of the goals Terry Mack scored for Liverpool were sensational. The chip at Aberdeen, the goal in the semi-final against Everton, the 6th round of the Cup against Tottenham, goals that anybody else would be hitting, and the accolades would be going on for years and years. But because he played for Liverpool and was part of a team that had so many superstars, possibly they're forgotten about. But the team that I played in 78-79 for me was the best side that I played in Liverpool over the 15 years. We had 4 or 5 great sides, but that team was just a bit special. The middle of the park, the hub of any great side, we had Case, McDermott, Souness and Ray Kennedy. And they had a blend of everything. They could put their foot in. They wouldn't get messed about. They were all good in the ball. They had all different talents. Ray Kennedy on the left-hand side of the pitch was brilliant in the air, great left foot, was strong, could find space in the box as good as anybody I've ever seen. Jimmy Case on the right hand side was powerful, terrific shot. McDermott was inventive, he was creative, and Souness just had a lot. And with Dalglish up front, with Ray Clemens in goal, with Phil Neal at right back, Phil Thompson centre back, and the names just go on and on. And you go back to the 16 goals against in 42 league games. At the time, you never thought anything about it, but looking back, you think to yourself, well, that was something special. And unfortunately, we only won the championship in 78-79. We got beaten in the semi-final of the FA Cup by Manchester United, and then in 79-80 we only won the championship again, and we got beaten in the semi-final of the League Cup by Notts Forest, and the semi-final of the FA Cup by Arsenal. And other Liverpool teams won trebles, they won doubles, but that side for me, which was the greatest Liverpool side I played in, only won the championship. But then we're talking about Liverpool again, and we're saying only won the championship. For anybody else, that would be the ultimate. But for Liverpool, winning the championship was not good enough. Every competition you went in for, it was, we will give our best. And you've got to win every game, and no prizes for finishing second. And that was the way. The bonus structure was very much, if you win, you got the big money. If you finish second or third or fourth, then you didn't get so much. And it was very much an incentive. I think the bonus for the first European Cup final I played in, I think it was about 90% of my wages in that season, which was phenomenal. And everything was geared towards success. You had to win, but to stay at the top for so long, that was the only ploy that Liverpool could use. But it was just fantastic times to be part. I've gone from Partick where the camaraderie was great and the humour was magnificent, but to go into a team that was actually winning trophies and actually to win a trophy, for example, the first year at Liverpool we won the European Cup. Now for the previous 5 years before that European Cup final night, I'd go with my mates into one of the houses and have a six-pack and watch the game. Then suddenly you're elevated into playing in the European Cup final. And I always remember sitting at Wembley about 20 minutes before it was going out, and I wasn't nervous. Then all of a sudden it hit me. This is the European Cup final. Real Madrid's, the Ajax's. I'm going to play in the European Cup final. This is something you dream about. And then you actually go and win the competition. And I remember after going up the steps and getting the medal, which is the greatest thing that can happen to anybody. Wembley any time is special, but for a European Cup final, it's just magnificent. And we go back in the dressing room and the champagne comes out and you have a great time. But I remember leaving to go on the bus with Terry McDermott after the game and nobody was about, and the two of us just reflected for a minute, and he had actually won the European Cup the year before, and he said to me, "Is this just the best time you've ever had?" And I turned to him and I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, I'm in dreamland here. Is this me? Touch me and make sure this is happening," because it was just something that, as a kid, growing up watching Real Madrid playing in the European Cup finals, you would never ever at any stage think that you were going to play and win as well, and especially at Wembley. And it was just sensational. And going around the city the next day when there's 500,000 Liverpool supporters in that city coming out to greet you when you get back, oh, it was just incredible. And you keep on nudging yourself to think, well, is this really happening? Is this? And then of course, with 6 or 7 times like that where you go around the city and you have 500,000 people there, and every time gets better, but the first one would be the one I always remember. But that was the European Cup, and the lads at the start of the next season said to me, "Well, that's not the best one to win. The First Division Championship was the bread and butter, and that's what you've got to win here. This is what Liverpool Football Club is all about." And Bob Paisley, the manager, would come in the dressing room and say, before the start of the first game, "We finished second last year. That's totally unacceptable for Liverpool Football Club." He said, "First is first and second's nowhere. We've got to finish first this season." And at the end of that season, we had scored 85 goals for and 16 against, something I think will never be beaten. I'm waiting for the celebrations to start. It's unbelievable. We beat Aston Villa, second last game of the season at Anfield, and we're in the dressing room, and I'm thinking these celebrations will go on forever. And of course the champagne comes out, and I looked in the corner, and Ronnie Moran came in the dressing room and he had a box in his hand, and he just said, "Right, who's played 13 league games? The amount you needed to get a medal." And of course the hands go up, and I naively put my hand up, and he threw the medal at me. He threw the 13 medals out and said, "Well done, you've worked hard and you played well this season, but it's gone. Enjoy your summer, because you'll get nothing for this now. Next season will be 10 times harder than this season." And that was the great thing about Liverpool. Never any sign of complacency. Once you won the championship and you had the celebration, when you came back the next pre-season, they drummed it into you emphatically. You get nothing for last season or the season before, the last 10 years. This is a new season. Remember how you got your success. Through hard work, through great team spirit, through good players, a little bit of luck, If we stick to that formula, then we won't go far wrong. But it did get harder. It got harder every season. Every season I played at Liverpool, it got harder and harder. For example, you go forward to 1990, the last season I played, we won the championship, and people said, "Doesn't matter, you've won it 5 times in the last 6 years, you won it again, so what?" And that is big pressure. And they were ruthless with it, with picking the players. And Bob Paisley, everybody thought was a favourite old uncle character, but he was ruthless. He would pick his 11 best players regardless. You could be in that side for 5 or 6 weeks and they could win every game. But if somebody came back he thought was more influential in the team than you, then he just drop you. And no questions asked, or no reasons given. And you were just expected to be part of that. And it was very much a squad system where there were 15, 16 players. You look back at the European Cup, for example, in the late 70s, you'd have 5 internationalists on the bench. We had great strength and depth, and every player, even on the bench, was a household name. And it was just strong. It was just a strong club at that time. What was the great secret of Liverpool's success? There must be a secret. I'll tell you what, team spirit was a big part of it. Liverpool teams used to think they were in front before they started, because when you went on the pitch, you knew that everybody would be in it together. Human nature dictates that you won't like everybody. If you've got 16 players, 2 coaches and a manager, you can't like everybody. But that doesn't matter, as long as you know that when you go on the pitch, you are together as a team. And if anybody gets in trouble, you've got a sort of bond and a unity where everybody's trying to get you out of trouble. And Liverpool managers throughout the time I was there encouraged that. If you were going out for a drink, say, they encouraged the 16 players, 2 coaches and a manager to go for a drink together. No 4 in one corner and 5 in another corner and 2 in another room. All be together. You can laugh, you can cry, you can win as a team, you lose as a team, you celebrate as a team, and you hold inquests as a team. And I think that a lot of people in this country knock the team spirit, but it was very much part of Liverpool's success throughout the times I was there. Great team spirit, great camaraderie, big laughs in the dressing room, big laughs in the training pitch. When you got onto the actual pitch for the game, then it showed through. Well, I think the team spirit thing was, again, a progression from Shankly. The 60s team, and you see them now. I mean, I sometimes go and play golf wherever, and I'll talk to Ian St John, I'll talk to Ron Yates, and they're all saying, well, we met up a fortnight ago, all the guys from the 60s. Well, you're talking 30 years on, they're all still meeting up. I think that speaks volumes for team spirit. We have Liverpool reunions every year for the guys I played with in the late 70s. So there must be something going on that, if everybody's still friendly and everybody keeps in touch. Paisley was very shrewd seeing this, Joe Fagan was shrewd, and Kenny Dalglish, when he became manager, he knew that this was a big part of Liverpool's success and he encouraged it. On a Friday morning, Dalglish would have a team meeting, and it would be a 40-minute team meeting. And you go in, and it'd just be 16 players, 2 coaches and a manager, and you talk about anything. You talk about sport, talk about politics, have a laugh. You only really need to talk about football. And he used to go and buy digestive biscuits. He'd borrow the money, but he'd go and buy the biscuits. And he'd come in, and he used to have a set routine where he'd get 4 or 5 teas out, and then he'd pass the biscuits about, and everybody else would get their tea, and you just sit down. And the purpose for that was just for the team spirit thing. Have everybody together on a Friday morning before the crucial day the next day. Right, let's get in here and just have a laugh and a joke and enjoy ourselves. And be relaxed and everybody be friendly with each other, so that when it comes 3 o'clock the next day, we're in the right mode, in the right frame of mind, we've got the right team spirit. And he encouraged it. And it's the same when you're getting beat. If ever we're having a bad run, you'd have a meeting, there'd be no holds barred. The tea would be flying and everybody would have their say. And then you'd have the inquest and you'd be back to the tea and biscuits and back to laughs. They wouldn't dwell on everything. When you're winning things, forget about yesterday. When you're losing, forget about yesterday. Tomorrow's a different day. Let's look forward. Let's be positive. Let's work on what's gone wrong, but don't dwell on what's happened. You get nothing for yesterday. And because you got beaten yesterday doesn't mean you say you'll get beaten tomorrow. And it was great to be in the dressing room, because you hear about guys going into the coaching manual and having long speeches. The managers at Liverpool were all short and sharp. It was basically, we've done all the hard work, you're all good players, get out and get in and get after them. And that would be the sort of team meeting we'd have. You know, they wouldn't go into great detail about the opposition. Kenny might say, well, the left back's weak on his right side. If you're going to attack him on his right side, or things like that, little things. But the team meetings used to last for 5 minutes, and then they'd concentrate on what we were going to do.
That's it from side one. Please wind to the end of the tape and turn over to hear Alan talk about some of the great Liverpool managers he's played under.